And I'll never forget, it was May 5th, 2021. I gave my resignation, and I think my manager thought I was a freaking idiot. And I told my wife that I did that. But we had enough of a runway, and Dad Edge was doing great. And I was like, I guess I can really make a go at this. And I did. And that was 5 years ago that I went full time. And yeah, no regrets, man.
Good for you. You've had quite an impact. Why do you think that so many men and dads struggle to prioritize their families and their children?
Yeah, I really got to hand it to men. I really want to honor men, because men, I don't want them to view themselves as broken, because they're not. And so many men out there view themselves as weak or broken. I disagree with that. I think men are unfinished. I think men, I think that the generation of dads now it's like the most powerful, intentional desire I've ever seen in any generation. We help guys from in their 20s to in their 60s in our group. And I see men hungry now. I mean, you see more dads at like the holiday parties at the kids' schools. You never saw that when we were growing up. Oh. I see dads on field trips. We never saw dads on field trips. You saw a dad on a field trip, you'd be like, is that guy unemployed? Like, what's wrong with him?
So true.
You see more dads at playgrounds. You see more dads in the stands now and at sporting events. You didn't really see that growing up. So like, I really got to hand it to men. But to answer your question, the biggest gap that I see is the how. So like I've interviewed several UFC fighters on my podcast, and I had this conversation with Frankie Edgar, who's a UFC fighter. He's also, I'm glad and honored to tell you, he's actually a good friend of mine now too. And he has been for 7 years. But like Frankie, when he was on my podcast and I was on his, we had this discussion because he's like, what is the gap? And I was like, I think if I could explain it in your world, like you've been doing wrestling and MMA, you've been doing wrestling since you were 5 years old. You've been doing MMA for years. You're a UFC Hall of Famer. That didn't happen by accident. The how was you were on the wrestling mat. You were learning. The how was your training camps. If I could compare this to anything, like think of somebody like me. I did some martial arts, right? But I can't get in a cage. Like I get my rear end handed to me. I might have a desire, like, and that's the desire that I see in men. Like, I really want to do that. Like, that just sounds awesome. But the gap is like, I'm not in the dojo. I'm not rolling. I'm not learning how to strike. I'm not learning how to do jujitsu, but I have a desire to. But the gap is like, you got to get in there and learn the skills. And like the biggest gap that I see with guys is they still try to white knuckle it. They think that we think that our desire and our intention is enough. But the desire and the intention is not enough. The gap are the skills. The gaps are the tactical things you learn. And after a while, what I've seen after doing this now for 10 years in our group is after you go through several phases and evolutions of doing and learning and being tactical, it actually becomes a way of being, right? And then you're operating with a completely different operating system than what you were when you first started learning these skills. But society will tell you don't need that. Society will tell you you're weak if you need to hire a therapist or a counselor, or even guys going to a psychiatrist. If they're dealing with something, you're weak, you're wrong, you're broken. And that nothing's further from the truth. Like it takes a man a lot of bravery and courage to raise his hand. I love when I see new guys come into our group, because what they're basically saying is like, hey man, over here, I don't have all this figured out. I'm ready to go into the dojo and roll. And that is the bravest thing that a man can do.
Takes strength, doesn't it?
It does.
It takes strength. Larry, what would you say it actually means to be a healthy dad?
So I think I'm a huge fan of G.S. Youngblood. G.S. Youngblood is an author. He's a speaker. He actually spoke at one of our events we just did called The Men's Forge. He's also been on my podcast. I've read his book. It's called Masculine in the Relationship. He also has another book called The Art of the Embodiment of Men, and it's great. And he's got a very simple 3-step process. One is respond, don't react. But in order to do that, you have to know how to self-regulate, right? So you have to know how to self-regulate yourself, because a lot of guys, what we do is we, if you look at, like, my oldest son ran track, and it's like, what do you do before your race? Like, you're stretching, you're jumping around, you're warming up, you're doing all these things. And men, and that's kind of a skill, right? You're not going to run, the 200-meter dash with cold legs. But yet we do that in our relationships with our wives and our kids. And, but knowing how to do that, how to embody that self-regulation. And then the other thing is lead with structure. A lot of us out there, there's a lot of nice guys out there. I'm a recovering nice guy. Dr. Robert Glover wrote an incredible book called No More Mr. Nice Guy.
Yes. It's an excellent book.
He's awesome. And it talks about how men follow and we don't lead. Also the 3 covert contracts of like, well, if I meet her expectations, she will automatically meet mine. And when they're not met, we get resentful, we disconnect, which is the worst thing you can do in a relationship. So lead, right? Men, we're not taught like I don't remember any of my friends or any dads coming into my life like, hey, son, this is how you lead in your marriage. Like, this is how you create psychological safety in your house where your kids are going to tell you everything, where your wife is going to tell you everything, even the hard stuff. This is how you communicate and connect. Like when your wife comes and vents to you, son, the last thing you want to do is fix her problems or tamper down her emotions. You need to validate her emotions. You need to create that safety and lead with structure. And then that's the third thing is lead with safety. A man is the thermostat in the family. He is not the thermometer. And many men out there, me included, we have a tendency to be the thermometer. So we react to our environment. We become unpredictable. And I'm not saying that guys, are abusive and that kind of thing. There are extremes, yes, but we don't have necessarily the skill set to know how to do those things. And that is the biggest gap that I see with guys, but they want to do it. They really want to do that. There's the desire is there tremendously.
It's the how that's missing. You're saying, yeah. How do you balance, I guess, basically providing for your family and at the same time being there for your family? Because I noticed that's a big deal in a lot of men's lives today too.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. So, men are hardwired to do 3 things. And the last thing is the hardest thing for us to learn. But the other 2 are pretty intuitional and they're pretty instinct. So, and I can't take credit for these 3 words. This is my good friend who also runs the Men's Forge with me, Ryan Mickler. He runs a great podcast and platform called Order of Man. And it's provide, protect, preside. So men are providers. Like if a man is unemployed or a man, doesn't have a job, he feels completely lost, right? It's actually a ding to his manhood. He feels it is tremendous for a man to feel that feeling because we are wired to hunt and gather. I mean, look at the Stone Age. Like men are out, they light the fire before they leave. They go out and they make the kill and they come back. That's hardwired in us, right? You need to be that warrior outside of the castle, but you can't bring that same warrior inside the castle. And I'll get to that. Protect, right? There's more, and guys are like, well, I'll physically protect my kids and I'll physically protect my wife at all costs. Men will run into an oncoming train to save their family. It's noble, but there's more protection out there. There's emotional protection. There's marriage protection from an emotional standpoint. There's emotional protection of your kids. There's emotional connection with your kids. That's another way that you protect, right? Is you can't just be physically, dangerous. You need to also be mentally, emotionally, and spiritually dangerous. And I say dangerous, meaning like compassionate, empathetic, there, creating space. And then leadership, we kind of touched on that. That's one of the hardest things because that's more skill than it is feeling. But I always say this, you clock in your job. Maybe you're an hourly guy, maybe your salary, but it doesn't matter. When you're outside the castle, like you're on, right? You are on. And guys they kind of like that feeling. They like being on. But let's also say this too. Studies have statistically shown year after year, 82% of men go to a job that they hate or despise in some way, shape, or form. 82%. So if you take a man's livelihood, a lot of men out there feel trapped in a job that's really unfulfilling, which really taxes our energy. It taxes our emotional bandwidth, our mental bandwidth. Well, then we come home and then we clock in again, but we clock in different. Now we provide, we protect, and we preside in a much different way, but we can't bring that warrior who's outside the castle in the castle. And what I always tell guys is you're clocking, when you come home at 5 p.m. or whatever time you come home, you are clocking in a different way. But again, the gap is like, I don't know exactly what that looks like. So to answer your question, you have to balance that warrior mentality, that hunter who's outside the castle, but you also have to be the king of your castle in a compassionate, empathetic leadership way. And a lot of guys, what we do is we decompress. We kind of check out a little bit, right? And I'm guilty of that too, even doing this work. Like I get exhausted during the day. But that second shift that you're clocking into is the most important shift. And just as you learn the skills or a trade or a career or whatever in your job, it's most important that you learn those skills and that trade of being a dad and husband. And that's what makes that journey and that second clock in much more fulfilling when you know what to do.
So true. So true. So Larry, then how can busy dads make their spouses feel valued and prioritized?
Great question. A lot of guys who come to our table, who apply for our group, and I get on a call with them. I would say a lot of guys come to the group because they really want help with their marriage. Studies have shown that if a married couple has been married for 3+ years, they haven't had sex for a year. That's the average. It's kind of crazy, right? But sex is only a symptom of other things going on. So usually there's a lot of emotional disconnect. And I'll ask a guy, do you know your wife's 3 basic needs? And a lot of times I get food, shelter, clothing. I'm like, I'm not talking about survival needs, right? I'm talking about what are the relational needs? Those are very different. And they'll guess. They'll totally guess. They'll be like, loved, supported. And it's these 3 things. It's seen, it's heard, and safe. Those are the 3 things your wife needs to feel emotionally connected to you. If she wants to be physically connected to you, you have to know that. And if you think about it, most men I ask that question to, and even people listening to this podcast, if that is new news to you, well, then you're going at your life with a shotgun approach and not a sniper, right? The sniper has the scope. He has the target zeroed in. He knows exactly what he is looking at. He knows exactly what the target is. If you don't know the target, you don't know how to do it. And a man needs to feel appreciated, respected, and we need physical affection, which is also kind of associated with validation because we take a lot of our validation into physical affection. But the easy button for men is this. Your wife's needs and your kids' needs are the exact same. Girl or boy, doesn't matter. Seen, heard, and safe, doesn't matter the age. Adult kids, I have a 20-year-old son going on 21. His 3 needs from me are still seen, heard, and safe. So if you don't know how to do that, right, and you don't know the target, the gap again is there. We don't need more time with our spouses. More time is great. What we need is that quality, intentional time. But like when guys tell me this one always rattles me. In fact, I was at a retreat with some of our guys who do life with us in our entrepreneur program called the Dad Edge Business Boardroom Brotherhood. We take those guys on a retreat every single year. I'll never forget, this was 2 years ago. We were in Arizona in Scottsdale, and we were in this Airbnb, and we were masterminding. And I was like, we went through a session of marriage. I was like, so what did you guys take from this? And like 4 guys went around. They're like, I'm going to be more intentional. I'm going to be more intentional. I'm going to be more present. And I literally stopped everybody as I said, I go, if I hear one more person say, I'm going to be more present, more intentional, I'm going to punch somebody in the face. I want you to tell me how you're going to do it. Tactically, specifically, SMART goals, be specific about it, be measurable about it. Is it attainable? Is it relevant? And time sensitive? Like how often are you going to do these things very, very specifically? Because without that how, and without that specificity, it just becomes an idea. And ideas are kind of airy-fairy, they're floaty. They don't usually result in anything. But getting guys very tactical and very specific, that's where the rubber really meets the road.
Yeah, I agree. You're so right. You're just so right. It's the how that everyone's missing. It seems. Larry, I want to talk to you about you're an expert in your background's health and wellness and medicine and physiotherapy, all that, right? Is that? Yeah. So why is physical health so important to fathers?
I think
for fathers. Excuse me. Let me rephrase the question. Sorry, Larry. Why is physical health so important for fathers?
Great question. I have this incredible good friend of mine. He's also a nutritional coach, one of the smartest guys I've ever come across when it comes to this space. There's a lot of fitness, quote unquote, gurus out there, and I've interacted with a few, but there's one guy that stands out to me. His name is Fraser Bailey, and he runs an incredible podcast called The Business Athlete. And Fraser is one of those guys who's completely transformed his life. He's a bodybuilder, but he doesn't compete. But he's a monster. If he stepped on stage at any bodybuilding show, he'd probably win. Totally natural, hasn't done steroids. But like everything that goes into his body is for a purpose. And every movement that he does is for a purpose. And what I can tell, what Fraser always says, and this is going to insult people, but your body is a resume of the mind.
Yeah.
So like if you're, if you're out of shape, it's a resume of the mind. And I don't say that to insult people. I've been in fitness for 30 years. It is like literally my therapy. I'm going to be 51. And I don't say this to brag because it's just a result of what I do and why.
Yeah.
But year round, I'll stay under 10% body fat. And it's not because my goal is to stay under 10% body fat. I was just having this conversation with my 20-year-old son who's going to be a firefighter. So he needs to be physically fit and ready to go at all times. And I just tell him, when you take care of your physical body, yeah, sure, the physical results are fine. They're great, right? But what is the why? And, the thing I was telling him is like, the reason I train almost every day is because it helps my mental health. It helps my emotional health. It helps me show up on podcasts like these with energy. It helps me show up in my business for my clients. It helps me show up for my kids. Like I'll play, my 10-year-old is obsessed with wiffle ball. I want to have the body to be able to move. Like a lot of times when guys come up to me at the pool, they're like, how do you stay such in shape? And I'm like, and I just joke. And I was like, because I have to keep up with these 4 knuckleheads, man. Like, do you know how much energy that takes? Like how much they want to play? Like I have to like be ready for that. Otherwise I won't want to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, physical health, I think is a really big thing, but I think 10% of it is physical body. The benefits are the 90%. Like what is the results of that?
I love it. What health habits give dads the greatest return on their investment?
I think that's really up to the individual. So, John Eldredge wrote a great book, this incredible book. He's written a couple of books, but one was, he said, in order for a man to be fulfilled, he needs a battle to fight, an adventure to be had, and a beauty to rescue. I don't really like the rest.
Yes, I remember that. I remember that in the book. Yeah.
But, I think it gives us, to answer your question, like it gives us a little bit of purpose. It gives us that battle, to go out and have a purpose and to have a goal. And I think that's the needle mover for men when it comes to that.
So, Larry, then what would you say are some of the myths that some dads still believe?
Let me also go back to the question of, men and taking care of themselves. I think number one, again, there's all kinds of, since I got my degree in fitness and sports med, I look at, if I didn't know that topic, I would be so confused right now,
Okay.
especially in this day and age. I'm like, I went to my doctor for my health checkup, my wellness checkup, physical and all that. And I started asking him questions. He's like, what kind of diet do you follow? And for me, what I found that works best for me is intermittent fasting. I love to fast. Like I don't eat my first meal until about 2 p.m. I eat my last meal at 7. So I have a 5-hour window every day where I fast. But that works really well for me, for my energy, for my mental health. I get all my macros in just fine. But I think there's so much confusion out there around like, what do I do? I see like these extremes, like hardcore carnivore, where all I do is eat a steak and eggs all day long, like every day. And then there's like vegan, where you don't touch any of that stuff, and you're eating salads every day and tofu and everything in between. And then there's keto, and then there's the zone diet, and then there's like fasting. It's like, which one do I do? I think you need to figure out whatever works best for you. But for men, I think there's a lot of guys out there that don't pay attention to what they're eating and what it's doing to their energy and bodies. So like I always joke with my oldest son. When he was 18, he was a senior in high school. He dared me. I have a beard now. I never used to have a beard, but I've had a beard for quite some time. But he said, hey, I want to do a bet with you. This was at the end of October. He's like, I want you to do no shave November for your hair and your beard and go all the way to January. And I'm like, I'll take that bet. I was like, I've never grown a beard, so why not? Like, we'll do it. And I was like, what happens if I win? All right, what happens if I lose? He goes, you have to eat whatever McDonald's I put in front of you. And I was like, oh, bet, man, let's go. I was like, I haven't eaten McDonald's in 25 years. I ain't touching that. I was like, what happens if I win? He's like, well, what do you want? I was like, that girl in biology class that you've had your eye on forever, you're too scared to talk to, you're asking her out on June 2nd. That's what's going to happen. And sure enough, he went and asked her out. That didn't go well, but he did. But I think a lot of us will, our U.S., food system is terrible. It's just packed with poison and preservatives and just stuff that will kill you. And I eat the rainbow. every day, which is mean like my macro bowls. That's what I call them. They're filled with colors, vegetables, and
Okay.
I love fruit, and I make sure that my protein sources are clean, but like high octane fuel sources. So like I don't eat out of convenience. I eat out of purpose. And then I move my body out of purpose as well. But I think a lot of guys just don't know what that key is, and they get confused online.
What advice do you have for dads that are overwhelmed, need to get healthy, want to get fit, but they can't spend hours in the gym?
Yeah, I don't think you need hours in the gym. I think that's one of the worst preconceived notions. Like when I train weights, I go for 45 minutes. Just that's it, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. I do cardio 3 times a week, meaning like I'll try to get in maybe 1 or 2 runs. I don't usually run very often, but I think steps are really important. Usually every morning I try to log about 7,000 steps before my day gets started. And that's about 3 miles. It's not a whole lot. But it's just moving your body. And I don't think you need hours. I think you need an hour, maybe 3 times a week. That's really it. So you don't need that. I think just being able to have mobility is really important. I'm 51. One of the biggest things that I focus on is not necessarily heavy weights. I actually focus a ton on mobility, like making sure my back is okay, my hip flexors are good, my hamstrings are flexible, because that is really going to impact you as well as you age as well. Making sure my knees and joints are healthy. But I think if you prioritize just simply movement, mobility, high nutrition value, like I think you probably got to figure it out. And but it really comes down to the choices in the moment. So like, I'll give you an example. We have this one client in our business boardroom, and he just can't lose weight to save his life. And he tracks his macros, and he tells me, he's like, every day I'm tracking my macros, and by the end of the day, I'm like 300 calories over. And I was like, what if we just tweak that a little bit? What if you actually put in all your macros in the morning? You know exactly what you're going to eat that day, and you just simply stick to that. And he's like, oh my God, his words, I am such an idiot. I've never even thought of that. I was like, yeah, try that.
Well, we need each other. Yeah. Larry, as a therapist who's practiced, this is my 26th year of practice. Thank you. I can't tell you how many people I've seen that have really been able to, for all intents and purposes, eradicate their depression through just exactly what you're saying, not this radical change of hours in the gym, but moderate exercise and really, really paying attention to their diet. And sleep has also been another huge one. And those 3 things together, it's truly remarkable, from brain fog to mood stabilization, less irritability, more productivity, better at home, better with their staff. It's a pretty big deal. But you're also training karate still. You're okay. So you're not doing the martial arts right now.
Now, right now, I actually I severed my patella tendon a year ago. Most horrific injury. Don't ever do that to your knee.
No, I don't want to.
And I did it in tug of war. So it's so dumb. But I don't do martial arts right now. I'm going to go back to jiu-jitsu probably in the next 6 months. I need to. It's been a year, but you probably need like 18 months for full recovery. But that's a good example. Let me talk about that for a second. When I got hurt, I actually, Frazier, like I said, he's been such a corner man for me. I got really depressed, man. Like I was on crutches for 8 weeks. Like I could not move. I was in physiotherapy one day, and I broke down in front of my physical therapist because I was so frustrated with what was happening. And Frazier challenged me. He's like, you have an opportunity here. I was like, what is my opportunity? I can't even move. I can't work my legs. I can't even walk. He's like, I want you to make it a goal that you're going to stay 10% body fat while you're going through this. I was like, that's impossible. He's like, no, it's not. It's not. He goes, I want you to control the controllables. I want your diet so tight, it's not even funny. I want everything that goes into your body to go for recovery. That is your mission. That is the focus. That's the scope. Everything that goes into my body is for recovery. And here I am a year later, and I tracked my body fat and I tracked my weight for 1 full year. And shockingly, I did that. I was like, how in the world did I do that? And it was controlling the controllables. I'd still go to the gym. I did what I could. I went to my physiotherapist 3 times a week, got out of crutches actually 2 weeks early, got out of my brace 3 weeks early. And now I'm back to full bore again, which is good. But yeah, I think if you can control the controllables, that's a big one.
So rapid fire questions. What is one habit every dad should start tomorrow?
Prioritize yourself, meaning take care of your physical health, mental health, spiritual health, emotional health. Without those four quadrants, and men are very selfless, so we'll want to take care of everybody else first, which I think is very noble, but it's also disserving you, and it's also actually disserving them. Because if you don't, we always say this, you can't pour from an empty cup. Yeah. You have to pour from a full cup. So that's what I would tell men.
What's the best parenting advice you've ever received?
It's a learned skill. It's not a feeling. And if you don't know how to do it, you're not broken. Go learn.
What's a book that every father should read?
I would definitely say the Masculine in Relationship. I'm a huge fan of G.S. Youngblood. That book will change your life.
What's one thing that the younger you wishes you knew about marriage?
My wife's 3 needs and how to fulfill them, how to make her feel seen, heard, and safe, how to validate her feelings, how to create space and not solve all of our problems.
What's your favorite family tradition?
Gosh, adventure. No doubt about it. Like we don't do like 5-star vacations or anything. It doesn't matter if we're on a family hike. It doesn't matter if we're on a camping trip. It doesn't matter if we're in our backyard, just around the fire pit, having great conversation, adventure and memories.
Good. What's a non-negotiable part of your daily routine?
Physical fitness and faith. I'm in scripture every day.
Good for you. Good for you. So what's the hardest conversation you've ever had with your spouse?
2017, I went through a horrific nervous breakdown, basically it was because I couldn't get my sleep together. I was training really, really ridiculously for an ultra event, and I spun my body into severe adrenal fatigue, which led to horrible insomnia where I was only sleeping for 1.5 hours to 2 hours a night for 33 straight days, became suicidal. And I was actually hospitalized. I self-committed myself to 4 days in a psychiatric ward. It was the hardest, most horrific thing I've ever been through in my life. Upon leaving that hospital, I got my sleep straightened out, but I was diagnosed with severe PTSD. And for several months, I went into a hole, and I was filled with anxiety. I disconnected from my wife. I thought I was actually protecting her because I didn't want to worry her about how bad my anxiety was. And I'll never forget, she sat next to me one day and she said, "You're losing me." My wife those words have never come out of her mouth. And I was like, "What?" I was like, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "You're losing me." And this was in 2017. I was like, "What do you mean by that?" And she's like, "I'm not packing my bags, but I'm starting to think about my life without you, which is scaring me." She goes, "You got to connect with me. I know you're going through a lot, but you got to let me in." And it was in that moment, that was the hardest conversation I ever had to have. But this is when I dove into all the skills of marriage. I was like, I got to get this one figured out. I got to get it figured out now. And I was able to recover, but that I will never forget that conversation.
Wow. Thanks for sharing. Wow. 2 more questions, Larry. What's a parenting mistake that taught you an important lesson?
Patience is a skill. It's not a feeling. So it's also associated with emotional resilience. And if you don't learn how to be emotionally resilient, how to be calm in the heat of chaos, if you can't be the responder versus the reactor, number one, you're not broken. You probably just haven't learned the skill to do so. And you constantly have to. It's just like being in the dojo. You constantly have to refine that skill of emotional resilience.
In closing, Larry, if there's a dad listening who feels overwhelmed, unhealthy, disconnected from their spouse, and they're just really unsure, where to start and what this first step would be, what would you say to them?
I think your check engine light has come on. Don't ignore that. We don't go to the dentist when our teeth are falling out. We go to the dentist once or twice a year to get cleaned, right? We do that with our cars with oil changes. So number one, if you're feeling that, a lot of guys feel really alone, like I'm the only one dealing with this. You're not. It's 88% of marriages are disconnected in some way, shape, or form. Only 12% of marriages can actually identify their marriage as working and fulfilling. And that's the same success rate as a Navy SEAL candidate going through BUD/S. They have a 90% failure rate. So join the club, number one. But my advice to them is don't just listen to podcasts. Don't just listen to books, because guys become what we call content zombies, where they learn so many ideas, but they don't implement anything. And I would say get into community, get into therapy, get a coach, get a mentor, get into something where you can have conversations with somebody really smart like you, where they need help, and it's okay. Like I said, the bravest thing you can do is ask for help. And one of the greatest things you can do is learn the skills to do so.
I agree with you. Asking for help is strength. It's a strong person. Every single time someone walks through my door, it took strength. And then we get into the tough stuff, and we're going to have the difficult conversations. The people who keep coming back. That's strength. Yeah, that's character. That's character. That's depth. Okay, Larry, I'm going to give the last word to you. Any parting advice to any of the listeners out there who really are just feeling a sense of hope, that there's hope after listening to you, listening to your story, and that they too can overcome the past. They too can overcome and heal from abandonment, rejection, etc.
Yeah, your past doesn't have to equal your future. It really, really doesn't. Like if a knucklehead like me, a moron like me can somewhat figure it out, anybody can do it. I say that a lot. There's a lot of things that I was doing to break my family and break myself. So you're not broken, you're just unfinished. There's one other thing I want to say before we head out of here, and that's Dustin, you're an incredible interviewer. And obviously you put a ton of care into what you do and a ton of value for your audience.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for the kind words. And Larry, if people want to get a copy of your book, you've written several books. It's thedadedge.com. They can order directly off the website?
So there's actually, I've written 6 books. My latest book is The Pursuit of Legendary Fatherhood that came out in September. You can find it on Amazon if you want. But if you go to thedadedge.com/legendary book, for $28, I send a signed copy, a personalized signed copy. I write a note and everything in every single one. I send it to you in the mail, and then you'll get 2 free resources if you do that. And that is, you'll get a free access to my course called Creating More Patience in the Heat of Chaos, where I teach you 6 tactical skills to do that. And I also have a marriage course that is Creating Extraordinary Marriage Through Elevated Communication, Connection, and Intimacy, where I teach you 11 tactical skills on how to create that more polarity, more attraction, better conversations, better connection with your wife.
Thank you again, Larry. God bless you and all the work that you're doing, the lives that you're touching, the generations that you're changing. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart and everybody that I represent, thank you.
Appreciate you, man.